Okay, ready?
Good morning, Wildcats. Welcome to Cats on the Mic, your chance to hear directly from the candidates running to lead our student body here at K-State. I'm Brandon Kermer, and I have the pleasure of serving as this year's election commissioner. I also serve as a senator for the College of Architecture, Planning, and Design. I'm joined up here at the moderating desk with the other members of the elections board who have graciously given their time to help me co-moderate this forum.
Hi everybody, my name is Katie Albertson and I currently serve as the Deputy Attorney General.
And my name is Brian Blood and I'm the Student Senate Parliamentarian.
We'll be moderating tonight as we dive into a Q&A with the team open to be your next student body president and vice president, Brady Kappelman and Zoe Budens. Student government plays a vital role in shaping our campus experience, and tonight is all about making sure you, the students, have the opportunity to learn more about their vision, their plans, and their impact they hope to make at K-State and their administration. We'll be covering a range of topics, including student concerns, campus initiatives, and the future of SGA, so that students feel informed before they make their decisions starting on March 4th. So let's get started. Brady and Zoe, welcome. To start us off, give us a brief introduction about who you are and why you decided to run for president and vice president.
Yeah. So, hi everyone, thanks for being here. My name is Brady Kappelman. I'm currently a junior majoring in marketing and sales, and I'm from Liberal, Kansas. The main reason I decided to run, my freshman year, I got to join SGA and loved it right from the start. I think SGA is such a special organization that gets to give back directly to students, whether that be through our funding, passing legislation that's relevant to the student body. So I think that was something that instantly brought me in. And when it came time to decide to run for student body president, I had some great examples to follow.
It's not working.
And through that, I think having such a good time at K-State led me to wanting to run for student body president and give back to the university that's given me so much.
Yeah, okay, so like Brady said, thank you all for being here today. My name is Zoe Budens and I'm originally from Kansas City, Kansas, and I'm a junior studying sales and marketing. When Brady approached me about running with him for student body vice president, I really had to reflect on that. I'm a first generation K-Stater, so I've really gotten to experience firsthand what it means to come here, having that generation before me, immersing myself in the K-State experience. Being involved in high school, I knew coming into college that's something I wanted to continue, and so I've really just immersed myself in the K-State experience, being involved in various areas on campus. And then when reflecting on this position, I knew I had the skills and knowledge in order to really succeed in it. And just having that drive and passion for K-State and wanting to make it a better place for all students. And then hopefully I can continue that generation of K-Staters in my own family.
So in recent years, especially post-COVID, we've had a number of challenges recruiting and having students engaged. I mean, even as you can see here today with the Student Governing Association, what would be a few ways that you would, as student body president, student body vice president, combat and start that challenge and start to improve the engagement with our organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely think at the end of the day, one of our top priorities is making sure that we can make SGA as transparent as possible. As a student government, I think it is our responsibility to make sure that students are aware of the things that we're working on. I think one of the things this year that we were able to further in cabinet for student government was creating newsletters and creating different avenues using our social media to be able to better promote our organization. And I think by doing that and continuing those efforts, it will be one of our top priorities to make sure that students have access to the knowledge that they should get to know, especially because every student is paying for SGA to allocate the student service fee. So I think it's our responsibility to make sure that students are aware of that. I think another thing is creating a welcoming environment, I think is one of the biggest things. If I think about the organizations I've joined or just hearing from other students that we've talked to, people join organizations that make them feel welcome. And I think that's something Zoe and I strive to do, whether that be when we are selecting cabinet, talking to students about joining Senate. I think we want to focus on making sure that not only the two of us are creating a welcoming space where people feel like they can share their ideas with us and that they feel empowered to be able to run for positions and things like that, but also collaborating with other members of SGA, making sure that we're all kind of on that same page, making sure everyone is creating a welcoming environment that encourages people to want to be part of SGA.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit more to that too. You talked about really engaging like more students in SGA, and I think a lot of that starts with hitting prospective students. Something Brady and I have talked a lot about is creating a student council summit where we really bring those high school students who are in student council, interested in student government to K-State, and they really get to like see firsthand what an SGA experience would look like. Being a campus ambassador the past 3 years in the admissions office, I've really gotten to see how much a student impact makes on a future student's decision to come to K-State.
All right, thank you both so much for that answer. Brady, you mentioned collaborating with other people within SGA. Next year, I have the privilege of serving as the Attorney General, so I'm curious how you plan to coordinate with other branches of the government and to achieve your goals.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest ways in terms of collaboration with other branches is creating that open relationship. I think serving on the SGA leadership team this year, serving as Chief of Staff, I've got the privilege of getting to work with members of the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and as student body president, that is something I want to continue to do, meeting with each other, keeping that constant communication to make sure that we're all on that same page. And I think being transparent also about what we're hoping to accomplish, and also hearing what other branches hope to do, because I think after my time at SGA, I've noticed that if we can be on the same page about something, we have a huge organization. If we can all kind of get on the same page and work at things together, we can create a much larger impact that way.
Thank you for that. So the next question is, Greek life, athletics, and student government tend to dominate campus power structures. How will you ensure that voices outside of these groups are heard?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something Brady and I have talked a lot about is reinstating the Student Body President's Advisory Council. And you mentioned, Greek life athletics, they kind of have like that dominant personality here on campus. But this way we're getting representatives from all student organizations. Having, the presidents who are, there to advocate and really represent those organizations, have that voice and have that platform to really stand up and say, what they need, because Brady and I, we're in various sectors of campus, but we're not in all sectors. So it's important that even if we're not directly in that space, we're hearing from people that are in that space. So reinstating that advisory council will definitely help a lot with that.
I think to add on to that, something else that we want to focus on as well is enhancing one of our positions on cabinet called the Campus Connections Director, and changing that to be more of an outreach kind of position to engage with other student organizations on campus, especially those that historically haven't been reached as well by SGA. So I think that's something we also want to focus on, is being able to go to student organizations and share what SGA can offer them, but also create a space where people feel like they're able to come back to us and share their concerns as well.
So you're planning to add that position?
So that position is already in cabinet this year and has been for the last few years, to my knowledge. I think this would just be an enhancement of that position.
So, Brady, in your role as Chief of Staff, what would you say is maybe your biggest personal accomplishment this year? Maybe not something that you were able to kind of lead and really put forward, and it kind of came from you, outside of maybe just the other members in cabinet or the other branch heads that you work for?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things that we were able to accomplish this year and get set up, it was a collaboration with our public relations director. We were able to start sending out a student body president newsletter. That was one of the big things when I was selected to serve as Chief of Staff for this administration this year. That was one of the big things that I was really passionate about as well, was making SGA more transparent. So that was something, it was a collaborative effort, but I was very passionate about getting this newsletter out to be able to share with campus presidents and leaders in those organizations to make sure that we're doing our part to share what we're accomplishing in SGA so that students know that we're actively working for them.
You've mentioned a lot about this transparency idea. Where would you say that KCSGA is not being transparent right now?
I think one area that I've noticed just talking to students can be not really understanding how SGA works. And I know that it can be like a hard thing to explain all of the different things that SGA can do. But I think that's something that I've noticed over time is you talk to someone, maybe they don't have any friends that are in SGA, don't have any experience. It seems very foreign. So I think that would be something that we'd want to focus on is explaining SGA so that even if someone has no interest in running or anything like that, they could at least have that basic knowledge of like, okay, SGA is not this like super foreign organization where students won't talk to me. It's a place where if I have a concern on campus, I can share my ideas. Or if I'm a student organization and I want funding to go on my trip, I know I have access to do that.
So Zoe, Brady talked a little bit about people not being exactly knowledgeable about like everything going on at SGA. And to my understanding, you're going to be new to SGA. How do you plan to familiarize yourself with the roles and responsibilities that comes along with this big position you're hoping to step into?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the reason when I reflect back to why even Brady approached me in the first place is I've really immersed myself uniquely throughout campus. So whether that's, again, working at the recruitment office at K-State, for the past 3 years since my freshman year, you learn a lot from the pro staff that works in there, meeting with students every single day. And then I just wrapped up my term as chapter president of my sorority, which is one of the largest sororities on campus. And every single day within the student body vice president role, you might be approached with a situation and you have to act quickly and you have to be able to like really work with administrators. And I have that experience. Even though it's not directly within SGA, I've had that through my organizations. And it's not even just through my sorority as well. Every organization I've been a part of, I've taken on leadership roles. So Student Alumni Board, I've worked with the recruitment committee, the team lead there, to really dive into that experience, working with alumni, and in that sense. So overall, I think with this role, a lot of it is meeting with administrators, talking with students, and I've had that experience even through the campaign season. Brady and I have done a lot of work to meet with students, whether that's over coffee at Blue STEM, really just to get a better understanding of where they're at.
What's one issue you think that K-State's administration is failing at, and how will you use your position to challenge them?
I think, not to beat a dead horse, but I think transparency in a lot of ways can be something that I've noticed causes the most frustration among students is when they're not aware of what's going on. I think a good example would be like snow days. Like I don't personally know even what constitutes getting a snow day, what doesn't. But I think that's an area where I think students should be able to know and be aware of like the reasons why those things are happening. Because I think that would bring a lot more comfort when people see those things. It's like, oh, I guess now I understand why. Basically create more understanding for the operations of what they do. Because I think something that's really fortunate about SGA is that we do get the opportunity to get to learn about some of those operations, but not every student does. So I think continuing to like share those processes and help students learn how their job works a little bit.
I'll add on to that just a little bit. I think K-State does a really great job of giving so many resources to students, but there's almost so many to where it's like, okay, where's my centralized location? Where am I going to find exactly what I need? So on the administrative front, really just like condensing those resources to be, more transparent to students. That way they're able to see what they need and go from there.
So over the past decade or so, K-State has had a fair share of discriminatory and racist incidents that target a number of marginalized students and have been fairly public as well. Do you think the university's done enough to address these incidents, and how do you continue to grow those relationships with underrepresented students on this campus?
Yeah. So I can't speak to every issue just because I'm not aware of all of them. But I think there's always more that can be done. I think something that I've seen the administration do, just in the ones that I've got to know, is really meeting with students and getting to hear their perspective. I think that's one of the hardest parts of the job, is just there are so many students and you want to make sure you get that broad perspective. I think something that we would strive to do, to be able to listen to all students, that's one of the biggest things that Zoe and I decided on really early on, is engaging with all students. Because as student body president, we're not just student body president of our friends and the people that we know, we're the student body president of the entire university. So I think that's something that we would make one of our top priorities, is if there is a situation like that that comes up, we want to be proactive in that, not reacting, but meeting with students who are affected, making sure that we're doing everything we can to understand the full student perspective. Because like Zoe mentioned earlier, we have different areas, different people that we know, but we don't know everyone here. I wish we could. But I think that's something that we strive to do, is being proactive in that area, listening to students, working with the groups that could be directly affected by those things. And I think that would be our main goal.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about what your guys' platform of Engage, Evolve, and Empower. How do you plan to translate that into specific actions to improve student life and involvement at K-State?
Yeah. Is there like a specific one that you want me to highlight, or?
We talked a little bit about Engage as far as increasing student engagement specifically with SGA, but I'm really curious about the Empower aspect.
Okay, yeah. So I think Zoe touched on this a little bit. One of the things we talked about was the Student Council Summit that you'll see. That is something that I think would be transferred into a cabinet position. I think that's one of the things that serving as Chief of Staff has helped see whenever we've kind of been developing these platforms after meeting with students, being able to see where these could directly transfer to being a cabinet position. So I think that's one of the big things that we were very intentional about going through, was that these initiatives that we have would eventually be able to be put in someone's role to be able to help us with. So I can talk specifically on the Student Council Summit, and this is all kind of like forethought of what this could look like. I would imagine this would be something like we'd use our outreach and engagement director, maybe in collaboration with Campus Connections, to invite students from different high schools around the state, maybe even like Missouri, and really just depends on their prerogative of whoever is in that position. Collaborating with all branches of SGA would be another big part of that task, to make sure that we're making sure all the branches get to share their feedback, share their ideas, but also participate in it as well. So we don't have exact details of what that event would look like, but I think the key things is that the platforms are somewhat designed exactly for a role, so that there is going to be someone taking those positions over. And I think that these would all be, a lot of these bigger things especially would be collaborations with the other branches as well.
All right, we talked a little bit about Empower, but I'm also super curious about kind of Evolve, if you want to kind of expand on what that looks like and how you plan on implementing that.
Yeah, before I go into Evolve, I'll talk a little bit more about how these platforms even came to be. When Brady and I sat down first and we were kind of like thinking about our platforms, especially within the campaign season, we knew that it was important for us to get various student perspectives. So we sat down with our internal team of our campaign, and they actually wrote down like different buzzwords that they thought of when they thought of these words. And that's really how all these platforms came about. It wasn't just me and Brady thinking about them and then putting them out there. These are really from students and their opinions and perspectives. So I kind of just want to touch on that a little bit before I go into Evolve. Something Brady and I have talked about with the Union Program Council President Delaney is we really wanted to add that bridge in there between SGA and UPC, just because they work so closely together and they both have such large budgets that are going towards different events and activities. So that was a huge part of Evolve too, is really making sure there's that increased collaboration there. And then Brady and I, both being business majors, we have a lot of experience with long-range plans. And if you've never heard of a long-range plan, it's basically your freshman year, you kind of like map out what your classes are gonna be, what really you're gonna be paying for in the next 3, 4, 5 years, however long you're here. And after talking with some students, we realized some students had no idea like what their class schedule was going to look like even the next semester, and it was really just like a lack of transparency with their advisors. And so we would love to see that implemented across all colleges on campus, just to make it more of a forefront and more consistent across the board. So a lot of like Evolve is just taking on what's happening here at K-State, but evolving it to be even greater that way.
You've mentioned how a number of your platforms and ideas have kind of led into potentially a certain existing or a new cabinet position. Why are you kind of thinking about expanding and adding cabinet positions outside of those legislated instead of adding or encouraging people who might be interested in those to, say, join Senate or another branch, and then utilizing the existing legislated cabinet members to still carry out those platforms?
Yeah, so that's my bad if that got misunderstood. These would not be new cabinet positions. These are existing cabinet positions that we would have specific tasks for. Something in cabinet that some of you might not be aware of is that each year the cabinet position can kind of change based on the administration. So maybe one year someone's working on a different project as academic affairs director, working on the library, like extending hours there, but then the following year could be something completely different. So to answer that question, it wouldn't be necessarily adding cabinet positions or doing anything like that. It would be more like having a specific role that already exists, having someone fill that. And just because someone in cabinet already has that role, I don't think that means that it needs to be limited to just cabinet. One of the really cool initiatives that we got to work on in cabinet this year was the Donations for Citations initiative. And for those who don't know what that is, that's essentially you get to waive one free pass parking ticket that you get and exchange it for donating food. So this wasn't something that I was directly involved with, but I got to help with that. And this was a collaborative effort with our basic needs director on cabinet and a few of our senators in the legislative branch. So I think that's something that is really special about SGA, and I think we want to see continue is collaboration with all branches, but still making sure that our cabinet directors have a charge to help work on these issues that are important to students.
Since you are officially running unopposed, how can students be sure that you'll still actively fight for the changes and initiatives you promised rather than just maintain the status quo?
Yeah, I think that's something that Zoe and I really thought about a lot. Because at first I think competition is really good for SGA. And I think we were kind of hoping that somebody would also run. And because of that, I think the way that we went about going about doing this was we wanted to be very intentional about meeting with students. Again, not just meeting with people that we know, being really proactive in getting the most broad student perspective that we can have. So I think that's a goal that we will continue to have. Regardless of if there was a running mate or not, this is still a position elected by the student body, and I think we're going to do everything in our power to be able to advocate for students, whether that be in Student Senate, whether that be with administration at K-State, or our state and federal legislators. At the end of the day, that's why I ran for this. I'm passionate about evolving life at K-State, and I want to see every K-State student be able to leave here knowing that they had a great experience. So I can say for sure that that's going to be something that we will advocate for day one till the last day.
Yeah, Brady touched on it, but I can touch on it a little bit more. At the core of this position, it is advocating for students. I mean, that's what student government does. That's the sole purpose of it. And so, I mean, I know Brady or I wouldn't have decided to do this if we weren't fully 100% into it. That's kind of just how I live my life in general, is I'm not going to do something that I'm not fully passionate about. So like Brady mentioned, we have talked to so many students, and through those conversations, we've gained a lot of trust with various students from other areas on campus. So like Brady mentioned, from day one to the last day, we're committed to keeping that promise and working towards the goals that we set, because the goals were very intentional, not only to us, but to students that we talked with to create these platforms and these goals.
We've had a number of, fee increases both within, the student services fee. It's also the tuition fee strategy committee, but we haven't had an increase maybe here in the last couple of years, even though inflation has continued to increase and costs continue to go up. So if it were to be deemed necessary by the student services fee chair, how would you go about and will you go about working to adjust that fee, and how would you go about doing that?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things would be is trying to hear the different parties that are involved. Obviously, the student service fee chair arguably probably has the most knowledge about that, so that would be an important relationship that we want to create, getting to know what they have to say, their insight, after seeing what the potential student service fee increases could look like. But I also think at the end of the day, like, the fee is something that's very personal to every single student at K-State. We are all paying into it. And I think that's something that as we consider things increasing everywhere around us, that we do our best to advocate for keeping the fee at least the same. So like, if it ends up being that we have to do an increase, I think we'd want to advocate for the lowest possible. Because at the end of the day, students are paying money for this. And I think that we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of that money to make sure that students aren't having to pay an increase every year. But I also understand at the same time, things do get more expensive, so sometimes that's a decision you have to make. So in summary, I think that would just be a conversation that we would really want to focus on, talking to as many parties as possible.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit more. I think affordability is one of the biggest hindrances in prospective students wanting to come to a four-year university. So like Brady mentioned, lower in cost that we can make it, the lower we're going to want it to be, because we don't want that to be a hindrance to why students don't immerse themselves in the K-State, why they don't make that commitment. Especially in my experience talking with prospective students, finance is one of the biggest, kind of hindrances in that. So really, trying to be as low as possible, keeping it consistent to where it's been the past few years.
We do have a little bit of time left, so if there's any audience questions at all, we'd love to take those. I think there's at least one.
Yeah, I want to draw attention back to your student council summit. And one thing I was starting to think about was, have you thought about planning to connect with students from high school CTSOs and organizations like FFA, FBLA, FCCLA, and so on?
I cannot say that we have, but I think that's a great idea, honestly. And I think that speaks to what we were talking about a little earlier about prioritizing, meeting with other voices within SGA, because, we may have a fleshed out idea of what it's going to look like, but there's always times that when we're going about those things, we hear someone else's perspective, think of something we didn't think of. So while it's named Student Council Summit, I don't think it's limited to that, and I'd love to talk further about that as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great suggestion. I think another thing too, Brittany and I have talked about a lot, is really getting us as K-State students into those high schools. So if you don't know, every student at K-State has what's called an admissions representative. That admissions representative will come to your school and they'll talk with students. But when you talk with prospective students, their main reasoning for coming to K-State is because they met someone at K-State that they can see themselves in their shoes. So I think the Student Council Summit, or whatever we call it, is a great way to really connect with those prospective students. But yeah, thank you for that question.
Were there any other questions?
What's been your favorite part about this campaign?
I'll start. Thanks, Eve. I think for me is, Brady and I are both from the College of Business, and though we're both like pretty involved in it, I would say my favorite part has just been like meeting with students. Like, you don't realize like everyone has like a very, one-way perspective of K-State because that's what they've experienced and that's their story. So really like hearing the different stories and various like reasons for people coming to K-State, what they're passionate about, it really like reminds me why I chose this university in the first place, and what I aim to see when I came here. So to answer your question, Eve, mine would be meeting with students like you, and getting their story and perspective.
Yeah. I feel very similar. I think getting to meet new students has been one of the best parts of the campaign. And I feel like that's been such a privilege, just getting to meet people that I may have never gotten the chance to meet with if not for this opportunity. But I also think just, hearing people's, like, how they view things, I think has also helped just to get a better understanding of, like, what K-State has to offer and what it means to different people. I think it's easy to be like, oh, K-State's the same for everybody. But you start to meet with people and see like, wow, like this person still really loves K-State, but they get to be involved in something completely different and still love it all the same. So I think that's been one of the best parts.
I'm loving these audience questions. Any others? Paige.
Can you guys talk a little bit about your relationship with each other and how you're going to work together and why, what qualities you saw in each other to decide to run together?
Okay. Yeah. So if I think back to, this was April, when I had was very firm in the idea of I wanted to run for student body president. I remember kind of just thinking through, and Zoe honestly was probably the first person that I thought of. And I think one of the really cool things about Zoe is, while she hadn't been involved in SGA, I'd always known who Zoe was through mutual friends that we had, different things like that, and just saw her passion for K-State. I think that was very clear. But also really cares about students, really wants to see students at their best. The way that she acts around her friends, she really cares about her friends, and I could see that easily being transferred over to being a great advocate for the student body.
Thanks, Brady. That was really nice. I think with me, with Brady, is when he did approach me, I was very much oh wow, I would have never saw myself in this position. And when he sat down, he got to it right away. And that's what I appreciated about him, is that he really laid out, this is what it looks like, this is why, I think you'd be great for this. And so that was a really good part at first, but then Brady has really just dived into not only SGA but K-State. He's taken his experience and driven it to the max, which I really appreciate in him as well. And same what goes along with him with the people he surrounds himself with. You can tell he very much cares about every single person and is going to go the extra mile for them, and that's definitely going to translate into this role.
Any other questions from the audience? Max again.
One thing I thought about is both of you guys are business majors. So how do you go about understanding how students from a wide variety of majors have a different types of services offered to them?
Yeah, that's a really great question. That was something Brady and I recognized immediately once we decided to run together is, we're both from the College of Business, what are we going to do? And that's really what comes into play with meeting with various students, getting their perspectives. Because I'm in the College of Business, but someone from the College of Engineering might have a completely different perspective, different resources than I do on my college in general. So we talked a little bit about the long-range plan. I noticed that was something that the College of Business, we had that resource, so why isn't it consistent across the board with all of the colleges? So I love that question, and I think a lot of it is meeting with students that are in that space, because in order for us to understand that, we need to hear directly from the students that are sitting in those lecture halls every day, meeting with their advisors, meeting with those various professors.
Following up on that, how are you going to go about making sure those new students that you've been able to meet during this campaign are included as you're filling those appointed positions, such as your cabinet and especially your chief of staff?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we will be very strategic about is meeting and following up with the students that we got to meet with earlier on in the campaign. making sure that they're aware of the different opportunities with cabinet, senate, chief of staff, all those different things. I think that would be one of the things that we really would prioritize. I think another thing with cabinet, and I think what I've really enjoyed about it is like, it's a really good group that works really well together, but we have people from all over campus, and I think that's something we want to continue, is getting that perspective with students from a wide array of backgrounds in our cabinet. So,
Last call for questions. Eric?
I don't know if you guys already mentioned this or not, but what are you guys most excited to achieve or do during your term?
I think one of the things that got me most excited about like wanting to run in one of the like platforms that we kind of landed on was working with prospective students. I think that's something SGA historically hasn't gotten to do a lot with. But last March, I got to go on one of the Connected Cats visits, where we got to go to my hometown, get to meet with people from the community, and that experience was probably one of my favorite K-State experiences, just because you got to see like people from my high school that went to my high school get to learn more about K-State and see that it was a possibility for them. And I think that's something that honestly makes me really excited, is the idea of getting to share to people throughout the state, you know, hopefully, that K-State is not something that's super out of reach for people, and sharing like, it is very possible, and the amount of opportunities and like growth you'll find if you decide to go to K-State are just exponential. So that just makes me excited to see the potential students that will be impacted and get to see what K-State can offer them.
Yeah, I agree with Brady there. Obviously, working with prospective students every day, meeting with them, giving them tours, showing them K-State for maybe the first time. But I'll touch on something else that I'm really excited to hopefully accomplish, is really reinstating the Student Body President's Advisory Board. When I was talking with Brady, you know, being president of my chapter, I was able to like represent my chapter at delegate meetings to like IFC and PHC. So I kind of wondered like, why are we doing that on a larger scale? Through SGA, having those presidents of those various organizations coming in, giving like what's going on with them, their lives, and like their organization. And we mentioned a lot about like how we're so excited that we got to meet all these students throughout our campaign. So really trying to continue that by reinstating the advisory board.
I got a question from more of a student media production standpoint, and what we've seen over at Kansas University recently with the Daily Kansan currently being under stress of whether or not they will receive their funding moving forward, and whether or not that will be reduced by 60%. How might you guys approach the relationship with the student media organizations on campus and being able to advocate and provide resources for freedom of press and supporting students?
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. So this is back in high school. I was editor-in-chief of my newspaper, and I was on the newspaper staff for 4 years. So I completely understand that concern. And for me, especially just like with what's going on in the world with, you know, advisory and press and everything, to me, that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I think is something that's super important to continue that way. But I can let Brady answer a little bit more on that.
Yeah. I think another way is, one of the cool things this year that SGA has gotten to do is creating partnerships with Wildcat 91.9 and Student Creative Services. And I think that's something we want to continue to do, to be able to understand the different things that they do for students, and just gain that larger perspective. But I think, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing at the end of the day, is understanding the different stresses that our budget has, but also understanding the value that these different organizations provide to students. So I think it's all a collaborative effort at the end of the day that we'd be prioritizing.
So I think before we wrap up here, as a good closer, I think everybody in this room has something different they love about K-State. But what's something that you love about K-State?
I want to say the people, because I feel like it's true. But honestly, like, because I think all of us would probably say the people. I think what is really special about K-State is like the access to opportunity. If I think back to like my senior year before I came here and compared to now, the amount I feel like I've been challenged and been able to grow is one of the most special things, whether that be being involved in student government, being involved in like the student ministry I'm in called STUMO, just different areas, having people to look up to in SGA, different things like that. I think that's one of the coolest things about our university is that we have people that are passionate about helping you grow in all different ways. And I think that's one of the biggest things that K-State has offered me.
Yeah, I'll touch on my K-State story a little bit. So I mentioned earlier I'm a first-generation K-Stater, so no one in my family had come here before. And growing up in KC, I always thought I was going to go out of state. Then I came on my visit here, and I think I just immediately recognized kind of like what Brady was touching on. It's just like everyone cares about one another, and everyone's going to push you to succeed. So even I met Mike Finnegan on my visit to K-State, and not even like a year later, he saw me and he was like, "Hey Zoe, glad to see that you came to K-State." And I think that's just really representative of our university. And you're gonna hear it all the time, family, people. But I even tell people on my tours, you hear that because it's true. Like everyone here seriously cares about you, not only just like the students around you, but your professors. Especially being in the College of Business, I wouldn't have the opportunities I do now without those people. The women that I've surrounded myself in my sorority, they're the ones that have pushed me to like be my best and succeed. And I really just think that's representative of K-State. And why I'm so glad I chose to come to this university.
Thanks for that answer. So that wraps up tonight's Cats on the Mic. Huge thank you to our candidates, Brady Kappelman and Zoe Punjans, for sharing their vision, and to all of you for being a part of this conversation. Your voices shape K-State's future, and your vote is a powerful way to make an impact. We do have cookies down here still for any attendee. If you're interested in getting more involved, don't forget the deadline to file for Student Senate is February 25th. There's still time to run for a position. We have a table up here at the front where a member of the Elections Promotion Commission will help you get filed. And mark your calendars, SGA elections will take place on March 4th and 5th. And you'll see that link vote. The link to vote will show up on Canvas and in K-State today. Huge thank you to Wildcat 91.9 for hosting with us, along with Student Creative Services for helping us with our marketing and advertising strategies. Stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, make sure you vote. And thanks again for coming out, and always go Cats.